The panelist for 5 o'clock session is different, so I hope you've sent them.
Yes, we've added them, yes.
Okay, all right.
So let's start in 3 to 4 minutes. It's 2:56 right now. Yeah.
Sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining the session today. Week 4 of SAT Prep Festival. And today we have Monika ma'am who will talk with us about punctuations. Looking forward to the session, ma'am. Good afternoon. Also wanted to share with all of you that towards the end of the session, we have a very special career counselor from Pathways Noida, who is going to join us to share with us some tips about the importance of SAT and ACT scores in the application process. So I encourage all of you to attend this session and then wait till the end of the session to learn more about the importance of the test scores in the application process. So without any further ado, ma'am, over to you.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Today's session is about punctuation. So punctuations are part of writing section of the SAT, and they contribute about 7 to 8 to 9 questions out of total 44 questions. Now, when we talk about punctuations, there are basically 5-6 types of punctuations that are important for SAT. First one, we begin with apostrophes, and that's usually one question, sometimes even two questions on the test. And then we have semicolons. So it's not that one question would totally be based on one type of punctuations, but then the answers basically come from some of these specific punctuation points. Then you need to know where the dashes can be used and where the dashes cannot be used. Then yes, one question usually you get where you need to choose between the dashes and the colons, or the colons and the semicolons, and so on. And yes, most important of all, the commas. Okay, so we'll talk about all these types of punctuations one by one. Let's begin with apostrophe. Apostrophe is that comma you put on the top of any word. So if I say Ram's house, then this comma is the apostrophe there, right? Apparently it looks like this is such an easy question. Why do we have to talk about apostrophe, or why do they give questions on apostrophe? So when it comes to questions are not that simple. So I'll give you one example. If I say Louis, and if I need to put this into possessive case, when I ask this question from my students, most of them think that since it is S at the end, it should be only apostrophe and not the S. 99% of the people mark that as the answer, and that's actually incorrect answer. So the correct punctuation here would be Louis, and then you put apostrophe, and then you put another S at the end. And the reason for that is that since Louis is singular, you're talking only about one person at a time, the apostrophe would definitely need another S at the end. Even if it has one S already, that's part of the name and that's not to be counted here. Okay, so that's one common question you get on apostrophes. The other type of question can be choosing between it's with the apostrophe and without the apostrophe. This is like, this question is almost always there on the test. So how do we decide between these two? Just try and use the expansion form. So with that blank, just put in and it is there. If that works, then it will be this correct usage. Otherwise, this answer would turn out to be correct one. Then you may get a question where you need to choose, or maybe one of the option would have there, THERE, other might have there, THEIR. Obviously, if you need possessive case, you use this one. If you want to refer to a place, you use this one. Then maybe you have to choose between this whose and this whose. Again, if you need to say who is, this is the correct usage. If you need to say who it belongs to, then it is this usage. So it's very simple questions, but yes, you need to be very, very careful while answering them. So that's apostrophes for you. Number one, you need to remember just because an apostrophe, a word has an S at the end doesn't mean it is plural. Just look at it carefully. If it is plural, put only the apostrophe. If it is singular but has an S at the end, then put the apostrophe as well as an S. So that Louis will change to Louises when you make it a possessive case. Next, and the most important punctuation when it comes to SAT is the commas. So we need to know 2 points here. Number one, where to put the commas, and number two, and that's more important to know, where to not use the commas. So where to use the commas? You need to use commas when you have plenty of items in a list. So if you have 3 or more points to discuss or items to list out, always put commas after them. So I want to buy a pen, comma, a pencil, comma, and an eraser. This comma that comes, before and is optional comma. We call it Oxford comma. If you put it, great. If you don't, that's also okay. But if you have two choices where one has the comma and the other doesn't have the comma, then make sure you choose the one that has the comma. Right, so that's one category of question you usually get to see on the test. There are 2, 3, 4 items listed and you need to check. If it is 2, you should not have the commas. If it is 3 or more, you must always have them in the commas. Next place where you should always use the commas is when the adjectives are reversible. Like if I say, she is a hardworking, talented girl, I need to put a comma between hardworking and talented because these are 2 reversible adjectives. Because I can say hardworking, intelligent. I can also say intelligent, hardworking. So wherever you've got 2 or more adjectives whose position you can easily change, always put commas between them. Okay, so next, where to put a comma? Yes, you need to put 2 commas around the clause or the phrase which is non-essential. If you're talking of something wherein the additional information you're giving is not that important, you can put it in commas. Like if I say my brother who lives in Australia is coming tomorrow. If I have only one brother, then who lives in Australia is only non-essential piece of information. I must put it in 2 commas, otherwise my question sentence would go wrong. And yes, if it is one of my 2 brothers or 3 brothers, then I must not put the commas there because that's an essential piece of information. I'm specifying which of my brothers is coming, and then the commas would make the sentence totally incorrect. Now, you must also put a comma when you're starting with a phrase which is like introductory. Like if I say, nowadays, it's very cold in Delhi. So nowadays, comma, it's very cold in Delhi. Or if you have a prepositional phrase in the beginning, you put that in comma. Like you put a comma after it and then you put your subject. Like if I say he was born in Delhi or he was born in 1985, so no commas there. But if I say in 1985 he was born, I'll have to put a comma after the phrase. In 1985, comma, he was born. So you put commas with items in a list. When number of items is more than 2, you put commas between the reversible adjectives. You put the commas after the introductory phrases. You put the non-essential clauses in the commas. Okay, these are the common uses of the commas. Okay, now let's talk about where to not put the commas. Yes, as I told you, that's really, really important to know. Number 1, never put any commas around prepositions. So wherever you have a preposition like of, at, in, into, for, from, etc., we never put it in commas. Number 2, do not put a comma between an adjective and its noun. Like if I say she's a hardworking and talented girl, I cannot put a comma between talented and girl because that's the comma between adjective and noun, and that breaks the connection and is not permitted to you. Okay, then don't put the commas around the self words like itself, myself, yourself, themselves. You don't put such words in commas ever. Don't put the commas when number of items in a list is 2. Do not put commas when you have a that clause. So never put commas around the word that, neither before nor after. Okay, then these are some of the usages or points where you need to make sure you're not putting the commas. And yes, do not put the commas when you have compound subject or compound object. So if you say Ram and Shyam are coming tomorrow, you don't put comma between Ram and Shyam ever. That's like compound subject, or compound object also the same rule applies. Okay. Now let's move on to next punctuation. We've talked about apostrophes. We've talked about commas. Now, choosing between dashes and colons. Now this is like one point you usually get 2 questions on. So let's begin with colons. Where to use colons? Number 1, you use them to show items in a list. But then this colon can be used only and only if you have an independent clause on the left side of it. So I want to buy 3 things today, then colon, pens, comma, pencils, comma, and erasers. So if you have an independent clause and then you want to list out items, you would put a colon before that list. But if you don't have an independent clause, you will not put the colon there. Then you're not permitted to use the colon. So I'll say I want to buy 3 items today, colon, comma, colon, pens, comma, pencils, comma, and erasers. But if you say I want to buy pens, comma, pencils, comma, erasers, so obviously no colon to be used there. Second and very important use of colon is wherein you have one independent clause and then you are using another one to explain what you stated before. Like you must exercise every day, colon, it keeps you healthy. So you've got 2 independent clauses there. You could have used a semicolon between them. You could use a full stop, or you can say a comma and an and, but the best usage here and the most concise would be to use a colon. Colon not only tells you that these 2 are independent, it also tells you that the second clause here is an explanation of the first one. It's telling you more about that particular clause. Another use of colon is wherein you've given an independent clause and then you want to sum it up or summarize the whole thing in one word or a phrase, or you want to name it. Like there's one university in the world everyone wants to go to, colon, Harvard. Or you say MIT, whatever. So when you have an independent clause and then you want to name something, you use a colon there also. So these are the 3 main usages of colons. Now coming to dashes, you can use dashes for items in a list. You can also use dashes wherein you've got 2 independent clauses where the second gives explanation of the first one, and you can also use a dash wherein you have 1 independent clause and then you're putting a word to sum it up or summarize it. So basically wherever you use a colon, you can use a dash. Then what's the difference between them? Yes, you may get a question where suppose you have 2 independent clauses. The second is explaining the first one, and one option says colon, one option says dashes. Then how do you choose? So colon basically is spontaneous. It gives you what is expected, while dash is dramatic. It has a lot of drama in it. So when you want to say something which is simple, you'll use a colon, but when you want to create a dramatic effect or you want to make it more intense, you'll use a dash. So I say, you must exercise every day, it keeps you healthy. That's like simple thing, you put a colon between the 2 independent clauses. But if you say you must exercise every day, you don't want to die early. So that will be a dash between the two clauses because that makes it very, very intense. So that's how you decide between the dashes and the colons. If you have something which is spontaneous, you say colons. If you have something which is dramatic, you say dashes. And then dashes have two more usages also. One is, you don't have paired colons ever. You don't use paired colons, but you do use paired dashes when you want to put an independent clause, or if you want to give an a non-essential clause, or you want to give an information which is totally, additional. You feel it's not very related also, but you somehow say it or you want to mention it, so you put it in dashes. So paired dashes are like paired commas, but then paired comma is very, very simple punctuation. Paired dash makes it a little more noticeable or intense. And then the other use of dash is wherein you've got two independent clauses and you want to show that there was a pause between the two things that happened that are being described in two independent clauses. So I waited at his door for 5 hours, dash, then I returned. So that gap, gets emphasized if you put a dash between these two independent clauses. Okay, so these are the punctuations that you should know when you go about answering those questions. Now, let me show you a few questions from the actual SAT, wherein you can use these concepts and you can answer those questions. So I'll just drag it. Let's start with this question. This is question number 1, and as you can see, the punctuations are, one option has a comma, one option has a colon, one has a semicolon, one has a comma after and. How do you choose this? Let's look at the sentence. The US healthcare system has made significant strides in the implementation of systems that manage electronic health records, which include information such as patients' medical history, medications currently prescribed, and a list of allergies. So how many things are we talking about here? We're listing out 3 items. 1, patient's medical history. 2, medications currently prescribed, and 3, a list of allergies. And what did we discuss? When you have 3 or more items in a list, you separate them by commas. And you separate them by commas, mind you, not by semicolons or dashes or colons. And that's the reason this option has a semicolon, so that goes out. This option has colon, this goes out. And this option has comma after and, while what you needed was a comma before and. So this also goes out, and this is the correct answer. So that's how we choose answer. This was a question based on punctuation. Moving on to next questions. As I told you, you get at least 7-8 questions like this. So for question number 9, this is a very easy question though. Let's read this. Furthermore, patient privacy is no more threatened by electronic records than it is by paper records, which are, according to the US Department of Health and Human Services. So this is like extra piece of information. Can you see? If you look at this whole thing, you have a comma here. And we did discuss wherever you have non-essential information, you either put it in 2 dashes or you put it in 2 commas. You can't have a dash on one side and comma on the other side. Now, this one you obviously cannot change. You're not allowed to change this. So obviously this has to change. And if we look at question 9 options, we don't even have to think a lot here. We just need to pick the one that has the comma, because on the other side of non-essential phrase, you have the comma. And if it is non-essential, it should have commas on both sides. And that's why this has to be the answer, the one with the commas. Right, so this was one simple question on the commas. Let's move on to next punctuation question. That's question number 12. Okay. So this one, let's read the sentence. Each component is vital. Each component is vital to the sustainability of others and to the system as a whole. So how many points are we discussing here? 2. One is sustainability of the others, and second is to the system as a whole. Since you have 2 things here, number 1, they should not have commas between them because you have only 2 items in the list. Number 2, you have a verb here. So obviously you don't put a comma between the verb and the object. That breaks the connection. So if I look at it carefully, this is a very, very simple question. You can't have a comma here. Let me annotate this for you. This says it is vital to. So to is a preposition. You cannot have a comma before a preposition. So this one is out. You can't have a colon before a preposition. This one is out. You can't have a semicolon before a preposition. This one is out. So obviously answer has to be A. This is a very, very, very simple question on punctuation. Okay. Moving on, one more question on punctuation, please. Yeah, question number 15. Let's read this sentence. By regulating water flow in streams, dams have ripple effects that radiate to something. Okay, so if we pay attention to this phrase here, we have a by here. And by is a preposition. By is a preposition. So if I read this whole thing, this is prepositional phrase, and this is not an independent clause. Since this piece cannot exist on its own, you can't put a full stop here. That means A is out. You can't put a semicolon here because this is not an independent clause. This piece is out. And you can't put a dash here because this is again not an independent clause. So this is out. And we did discuss the rule of commas wherein I told you you put a comma after a prepositional phrase. This is preposition. This whole thing is a phrase. So we call it a prepositional phrase. And after a prepositional phrase, we have to have the comma when it comes in the beginning. So this has to be the correct choice here. And again, very easy question. If you know the punctuations well, these questions are not tricky at all. They're in fact very easy to do. All right, we move on to next question now. That's question number 22. Okay. One moment. Yeah, this one is a bit tricky, but still we'll get to reach our answer on the basis of elimination. How do you know it is a punctuation question? When in the options, the words are the same, it's just the punctuation that changes. Then obviously it has to be a punctuation question. Let's read this sentence. Through such initiatives, comma, through such initiatives. Can you see this is a preposition? So you have a comma here. Wherever the prepositional phrase comes in the beginning, you have to have a comma right where it ends. Through such initiatives, beaver populations are doing what they do best. Now, think about this. Is it a complete piece? Through such initiatives, beaver populations are doing what they do the best. I can definitely put a full stop here. That means it is an independent clause. Okay, now let's read this whole thing out. Through such initiatives, beaver populations are doing what they do best, engendering healthier, more stable ecosystems. So you have one complete independent clause on the left side, and then you're explaining what you stated, what they do best, and then you're telling what they do best, engendering healthier and more stable systems. Since the second piece is only an explanation of the first one, it's kind of rephrasing what you stated. So this has to be a colon. Okay, this cannot be a comma, because you have an independent clause and then you're explaining something, you're giving an explanation. It has to be either a colon or a dash. That means comma is gone, and this one has a semicolon, that's also gone. Now choosing between B and C. One more thing, you could use a semicolon here if the second part also was an independent clause, which it is not. It is only a phrase. So this is not a clause and this is not an independent clause. So technically semicolon is also incorrect. Now, choosing between a dash and a colon, number one, I did tell you that dash is very intense, colon is very spontaneous. So when I have a choice, when I don't have a choice, I'll go for whichever is available out of the two. But when I have a choice, I'm going to choose the one that matches the intensity or the tone of what I wanted to state. And second, this one has a comma. Can you see the comma in option B? And that comma makes it totally wrong. You can't have a comma between the verb and the next word. You don't put a comma there. So this means B option technically is also incorrect answer. So the answer here has to be C. So this was a glimpse of how we need to do the punctuation, and we need to practice more and more questions. Punctuation questions usually are very easy, provided you know the basics correctly. Okay, so I'll pass this on to Charu ma'am now.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Monika ma'am. A superb session. Really enjoyed learning about the punctuations. I myself really enjoyed the whole session. It was great learning the different punctuations and how they are used. So super wonderful. With that, I invite Ms. Charu Malhotra, who is the counselor at Pathways School, Noida. Charu has been helping students, hundreds of students and Pathways, and she has agreed to share with us about how the test scores can help the students in the application process, in the college application process. It's a pleasure to have you, Charu, on this session. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Rishi and Monika. Lovely session.
Thank you.
Is my voice echoing?
Yes, it is echoing slightly. I think you are.
Just give me 1 minute. Now is it better?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So good afternoon, students. And that was a very informative session. Even I was listening to it, and I think it was really great. So I will start with saying that there is this one question which I get very, very often from students and parents. That is it important to give SAT? One very, very common question is, my child is not going to America, so do you think he or she should still give the SAT? So children, see, what is the SAT? It's a standardized testing, which is another table to show your academic excellence. So tomorrow, if I am an admission officer and I am going through your application, I see a score of say 1400 or a score of 1500. The moment I see that, the first thing which clicks me is, okay, a bright child. Okay, so it is another way to show your academic excellence. Apart from that, universities, not only in America, even in India now, we have Narsi Munji, Symbiosis, Ashoka, Shiv Nadar, even Vellore Institute of Technology, and lots of universities which have started considering the SAT. In fact, I was having a word with another university where you do not need to give the entrance exam. I'm not naming the university right now. If needed, I will. But you don't need to give the entrance exam if you've given a SAT and you've scored a 1250 in the SAT. So that is one reason I feel all of you should give the SAT. The second thing is there are times where we all goof up our exams sometimes. So maybe it's the midterm and I have not really done very well in mathematics, but my SAT score shows that I have like a 750 out of 800 in mathematics. So it supports your application when you go ahead and apply to colleges. So definitely the second tip which I want to give all of you is, please start preparing well in time. The SAT does not happen overnight. Within 15 days or within 1 month, you cannot be prepared for the SAT. At least a good 3 months is needed. And I'm sure you all know you can give the SAT more than as many number of times, and you can also consider a super score. So super score is you can take English from one and mathematics from the other and join them together to show your score. But practice well in time, take out weekends, take out early hours of the morning, but try to practice regularly and give the SATs. Okay. So that's all from me right now, and good luck to all of you. Anything else, Devish, you want me to address?
I think this was great. Really, thanks for sharing a couple of the points that you had. Is Pathways Noida also a test center? Do you?
So yes, so Pathways Noida is very much. In fact, all the Pathways Noida, Gurgaon, and Aravali, we are all SAT centers. So
Okay,
if anybody wants to register, they're most welcome.
Okay, and so you are hosting the upcoming SAT. When is the next?
We will be hosting the ones in March as well as May and June.
Okay, wonderful. And in the past, so a lot of SATs were cancelled, right?
Yeah.
So which was the last SAT that?
So they were all cancelled in August. In fact, I think Delhi NCR had just 2 schools, and in NCR we were the only one who did the SAT in August, September, October, as well as December.
Oh, wow.
So though we had a very few tough protocols, the COVID test report was a must as per the government directive for the child to come and give the SAT. I don't know what is going to happen in the coming months, whether we will still need to follow those directives. We have to consult the government and then get back. But yes, we did the SAT all the time.
Okay, that's great. Superb. So as a test center head, any tips that you would like to share with the students?
Yes, definitely. Panic is the only thing you should not do. Practice. There are times where I have myself faced the fact that where the student has ticked wrong, bubbled the sheet wrong in the answer sheet, the bubble has gone one up and one down, and then when he got to rubbing all of them, if even I was in his place, you get very nervous, you get panicked. So practice is very, very important. Definitely, where it comes as a center, please come well on time for your next, whenever you have to, be there so that you are settled for 15 minutes. The environment gets in and you are a little calm by the time you start. Don't rush in. I've seen children who rush in at 5 to 8 and they're like, somebody can't place their ID, somebody can't, place their other stuff. So that's all.
Super, wonderful. That's really great practical advice for the students. I'm sure they learned something very interesting. Thank you so much, Charu, for presenting the session. It was a pleasure having you here today.
Yeah, and good luck to all the students. And thanks, Monika. That was a great session.
Thank you to you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Over to you, Monika, ma'am.
Yeah, so we have plenty of questions in the Q&A. Do we have time to take up a few?
Yes, please. Yeah.
All right, so I have this question. There are 3 students, namely Colin, Cole, Jane, and Harry. Is this sentence correct, or there should not be a colon after namely? There should not be a colon after namely. This is like an introductory word. So this connects the two pieces together. You don't use a colon where the entire sentence is one single thing. You can put a colon only after an independent clause. So here, if you say namely, that doesn't make it an independent clause. Okay, someone has asked, could you explain the last two uses of dashes again, please? Yes, I will. The two uses of dashes wherein which don't apply to colons. Number one, you can have paired dashes. You can't have paired colons. By paired dashes, I mean one dash on one side of the phrase, another dash on the other side of the phrase. So you can't have those paired colons, you do have paired dashes, and that's basically done to show that this piece of information is non-essential and can be done away with also if needed. The other use of dashes is where you want to create a pause. So you want to convey this feeling that there was a gap between the two things that happened. So one clause explains some action, other clause explains another action. If you want to convey this time gap between the two, you put a dash between them. Someone said, please do explain the semicolons also. Semicolons are exactly like the period or the full stop. The only difference between the two is, when you have two related clauses which are independent to each other, you can put a semicolon, you can put a full stop also. So wherever you put a semicolon, you can always put a full stop in its place. But where you have a full stop, you may not always put a semicolon there, because semicolon tells you that these two clauses are independent of each other, but they are related to each other as well. So you put a semicolon between the related independent clauses. They'll never give you a question where you'll have to choose between the semicolons and the full stops. Okay, so what is the difference in use between a semicolon and a colon? A colon is, when you're listing out items, you will never use a semicolon there. You'll only use a colon. But semicolon is only and only used when you have two independent clauses, one on the either side of it. A colon can be used when you have an independent clause on one side and a phrase or a word or another independent clause on the other side. The difference when you put a colon between two independent clauses, where you could have easily put a semicolon also, colon gives you additional meaning, that the second clause is explaining what was given in the first clause. A semicolon would never convey that meaning. Okay, I guess that covers all the, okay, someone asked me, ma'am, the rules you mentioned us, can you please tell us from where we can learn these things? You can learn these things on the internet, or you can use a few books like College Panda, Sat Writing, and so on. Okay, I guess. How is the intensity of clauses defined? I mean, that's a subjective thing. Where you have one option, only one correct choice, that's like you don't have to choose between a colon and a dash when only one of these is given in one of the choices. This intensity comes into play only and only when one option has a dash, other has a colon, and both are equally valid. Then you read the paragraph or the sentence and see, is it like something very, very regular or descriptive in nature, or is it like where you're kind of creating that dramatic effect? So it's subjective, but it's you easily get that tone or feeling. It's not a difficult thing to do. Okay, someone is asking me about the SAT dates. You can Google this. You'll easily get information. And Gavi, someone has asked, is SAT and ACT, are SAT and ACT both considered in India? Yes, both are equally valid. No one is going to, look at one score and ignore the other one. SAT and ACT are absolutely equal exams. I mean, there's no university in the world that takes one score and ignores the other one. Okay, so I guess we've covered all the relevant questions.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Looking forward to the next session, which is a session on reading, I think.
Yes, that's at 4 o'clock.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, students, for joining the session. Looking forward to having you all again for the 4 p.m. session. Stay tuned. Okay, ma'am.
Right. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.